intend to make the thought leader series an annual event that will be of relevance and great interest to all of you. Without much, I think we should get the ball rolling, and we're going to start off with an introduction to the program itself. And I'm going to ask Ray to give a quick presentation on the Biodesign program.
Again, thank you all for being here with us today. I see a number of familiar faces here. So for people who really understand Biodesign, please bear with me. For the sake of some of you who are new to us, I just want to spend a few minutes with you to let you know what Biodesign is, what we do, and the role we wish to play in the local MedTech ecosystem. So Singapore-Stanford Biodesign program is a collaboration between A-Star, EE, and Stanford University. We are a training program. We're a training program modeled after a very successful MedTech innovation program in Stanford called the Biodesign. So what is Stanford Biodesign? Biodesign was started by these two gentlemen that you see over here, Professor Paul Yap and Dr. Josh Howard. So similar to Dr. Fogey and Mr. Liu, who are giants in our MedTech ecosystem, Paul and Josh are themselves also experienced inventors and entrepreneurs. Paul trained as a biologist. He was also a serial inventor. So the things that he invented include the rapid exchange catheter and introducing intravenous ultrasound into cardiology. So Paul came from a background of an entrepreneur, inventor, who have seen how to move an idea from bench into the clinical space. Josh Howard is a serial entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. He's the CEO of a very successful incubator called Explorer, and his latest exit is a Clarence. Sold to Johnson & Johnson for $800 million. So both gentlemen, being giants in the MedTech field, they asked themselves this question 10 years ago. They've seen a rich community in Silicon Valley. Startups have come and go. Startups have become successful. Some startups that tripped and failed. Are there nuggets? Are there wisdom that they could tap, such that these are wisdom that they could further teach for younger generations as we also embark in biomedical technology innovation? So this really set off their motivation to start Biodesign program. And after 10 years, what Biodesign teaches at the core is what we call the Biodesign process. We believe in Biodesign that a good idea, a good innovation really starts with a clear clinical need. We know that there's different paths to success. Sometimes with technology push, you can develop great technology into the marketplace. But here at Biodesign, we really believe that to increase the chance of success, the good idea starts off with a clear clinical need that we want to address. And this is a clinical need that physicians observe. This is a clinical need that maybe as an engineer who goes to the OR, see a case that's been done in a repeated fashion for the past 10 years, asks a naive question, can this be done in a newer way, in a better way? And starting from that first step, we believe it will increase the chance of bringing an idea into the market that can be commercial success. The second phase of this Biodesign process is the invent phase. This is the part that we transit from a very clinical environment to a very technical environment. We loosen our head, we brainstorm, and on top of brainstorming with ideas, this is the phase that we believe we can start to do commercial diligence. So this is the phase of medical technology, we look at IP, regulatory, reimbursement, a business model. So that when we get to the last phase of this process, we think that we have a better chance of creating an idea that addresses a clear clinical need and have a better chance of negotiating commercial pitfalls and loopholes. And after 10 years, this process has been distilled into a book, and this will be the main textbook that Biodesign process will teach, and the Biodesign class will follow. Another secret sauce of the Biodesign program is really captured in this slide: real-world mentors. What we in Biodesign believe that on top of having a good idea, an innovator often at times need a lot of help. A lot of mentors who have gone through this path, a lot of mentors with different skill sets. So what we have in Biodesign, we believe is a secret sauce, is on top of teaching our fellows and our students the Biodesign process, we surround them with industry, we surround them with clinicians who have gone through the innovation process and to guide them along the way. So we've modeled after the Stanford program. We've brought this program here to Singapore now. And under the Singapore-Stanford Biodesign program, we offer two components, two main initiatives. The first initiative is our Biodesign Fellowship. So the fellowship is a one-year full-time fellowship modeled like a postdoc fellowship, where 4 individuals, highly talented, are formed together as a multidisciplinary team. And they go through this 1 year of observing clinical needs, inventing and coming up with a business plan. The second component of the Biodesign program is the NUS NTU class. So this is a postgraduate class offered by NUS and NTU. This is a class that we try to accelerate what the fellows experience in 1 year into more classroom setting. Both components of the fellowship and the class teach us a similar core methodology that we believe it is the Biodesign process. And in time to come, part of our Biodesign office here in Singapore, our hope is to develop also on top of the Biodesign process, an Asian process, how this way that we do innovation can be contextualized in the Asian landscape, how launching innovation from Asia or for Asians can be different. So just a little bit more details on the fellowship. We believe in a multidisciplinary team. On top of the Biodesign process, what we've noticed is successful companies or teams out there in the medtech world consist of a multidisciplinary skill set. And that's what we try to communicate in the fellowship. So every year, we really search across the island to look for doctors, engineers, or people with an MBA or industry experience to come together to form a team of 4. And our first batch of fellows, actually our first batch of fellows are probably here today. Okay, so if you want to say your name, you just raise your hand to say hi to everybody. So we have our first batch of fellows. First fellow is Dr. Henry Ho, zoologist at SGH. Fiona, Miss Fiona, trained in electrical engineering, used to be leading a medtech group in SE engineering. Third fellow is Miss Iris Tan. Mechanical engineering training, was a clinical trial coordinator in one of the few startups here in Singapore, Merlin MD. And last but not least, Dr. Anthony Tang, who is a general surgeon in UHS. So these 4 form our first batch of fellows, and these 4 fellows have gone through, are now right now in the middle of the fellowship program and just returned from the 6 months Stanford phase of training. And in this phase of the training, what we really have the fellows do is to really drink from the fire hose. They live and breathe Stanford Biodesign in Stanford to be trained in the Biodesign process. They go through boot camps and classes where they are trained in, on top of the Biodesign process, a number of other complementary skill sets like prototyping, physiology class, writing class, and IP. And on top of that, which I believe really the rich part of this 6 months is the Silicon Valley immersion. What we do is we surround our fellows as much as possible with all the veterans, the VCs, entrepreneurs in the Valley to coach them and to walk them through the projects. The second phase of the fellowship program is back here in Singapore. This is where they, from all the learning, all the skills that they've learned in the first 6 months, they come back here in Singapore to execute projects. And the angle that we're really trying to position our fellows is to be back here, place them in a clinical setting. And this year, our partner is SNEC, Singapore National Eye Center. The fellows will camp in SNEC for 5 weeks, and they will really observe what are the clinical needs that they can see within this clinical environment. And on top of that, is there any unique Asian clinical needs that maybe the Western technology has overlooked. So with these clinical needs, our fellows will filter them. They will actually look up to find out 200 to 300 clinical needs, have a systematic way to filter these needs and to generate solutions, and also have a systematic way to filter these solutions that generated. And hopefully at that point we will have a business plan and a prototype ready so that they can access that this is an idea that can move forward. On top of that, the fellows, what they experience in this 6 months is also a philosophy borrowed from medicine. See one, do one, teach one. As I will talk more about the class in my next slide, the fellows will become tutors of the class. So the class will form teams of 4 and they will execute projects according to the Biodesign process in more classroom setting. And this is the time when the 4 fellows with the skill sets they have learned and acquired at Stanford, they will also tutor students from NUS and TU. So now about the second component of Biodesign class. So this class is actually very unique. It's going to be the first joint postgraduate class between NUS and TU. That means half of the class students will be from NUS and they will be from NUS engineering school, regardless of whether they are electrical, mechanical, or bioengineering. They come from different background engineering. And they also come from the MBA schools from NUS and TU. So it's accelerated training on the Biodesign process. And what we offer students in this class is real-world design projects and real-world industry speakers. And what do I mean by that? So what we find that is unique about this class we bring from Stanford is 3 components. First of all, it's taught by faculty that train them in the Biodesign process according to the textbook that we mentioned earlier. The second part of this class, we believe also is like the secret sauce of the fellowship is half the class is actually taught by the industry. Every week, according to the theme of the class, we have an industry speaker to come and speak about the real-world experience. For example, regulatory, what was the hurdle that they really had when they tried to bring a product from Singapore to other parts of Asia, and how is that the same or not the same from what we teach in textbook. And last but not least, what's unique about this class is they work on real-world clinical needs. And what I mean by that is, remember, the fellows actually look for up to 200 to 300 clinical needs from the clinical immersion. Part of these needs that they find, you pass it to the class. So the class will start off with their project with a real-world clinical need that they observe. And if the class manage to come up with good ideas, these are projects that can have a lifespan and can become a potential startup. So these are 3 unique components that we think this class will offer, and we're very excited about this class. This class will launch on the 8th of August this year. Part of Biodesign, what we wish to do is to really give back to the ecosystem. So what we're trying to put together also every year is a resume book. We hope that students that come through our class from NUS and TU and fellows that come through our doors to share 1 year of their life with us, we can position them to the medical device industry. So we'll compile a resume book every year and we'll distribute this resume book to the industry. So for industry players here with us today, do look out for us. I know some of the gaps that some people may lament is where do we find people with the backpack skill set, who knows innovation, who knows R&D, who knows how to move an idea from the bench to the market. Is where we find these people, and that is the role that we hope Biodesign here in Singapore can fill. So do look out for us, and do have hopefully the people we train are people that we look on to favorably. So just before I end, these are just some of the companies that spun out from Stanford Biodesign. Despite being an academia program, we have up to 1 to 2 companies spun out from projects, either from the fellowship or the class. These projects are at different gone through different stages. Some of them, the early ones, have been really acquired by big companies. Different companies have gone through different rounds of financing, and some of them are in the seed stage looking for grant money. And we really think we take heart with this results. We think that it is quite a compliment to what we believe and what we teach. That through the biodesign process, an idea could have a higher chance of becoming a commercial success. But having said that, what we really want to reiterate is we are a training program. We do not plan to duplicate what some other agencies in Singapore are trying to do. We really see ourselves that the value that we create for our community is not to fish, but to train fishermen. And our real product is we have a heart that we want to equip as many people here in Singapore as possible to learn how to observe the human need, invent something disruptive, and turn that into a viable business. So with that, you can find more information about us on this website. And I will now hand over the floor back to Jui and Anurag, who are our moderators for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Okay, we're going to do this in a roundtable discussion format. I'm really excited to introduce people on the stage this afternoon. Okay, seated right over there on my left is Anurag Myron. Anurag is the program director for Stanford Global Biodesign and has been instrumental in helping conceptualize our strategy for the Singapore program. Next to Anurag, we have Professor Tom Fogarty. I don't even know where to begin with Tom. You know, this is the man behind Fogarty Catheter. Fogarty Catheter is a development that made possible balloon angioplasty, peripheral and coronary stenting, Swan-Ganz catheterization, and most recently transcatheter valvular replacement. And I think there's no exaggeration to say that the notion of performing procedures through tiny tubes, father or mother, as the case may be, laparoscopy, endoscopy. But it didn't end there. He went on and invented aortic stent grafts. Currently, he's working on modification of gamma knife procedure to ablate atrial foci of normal rhythm in the heart. And he has had a hand in starting at least 33 companies. He holds more than 100 patents, and in 2001 was inducted into Inventors Hall of Fame alongside Thomas Edison and Mike Burns. So, big round of applause to Tom. We are deeply honored to have you with us. Next to Tom, and on my left, is another heavyweight. This guy did it his way. This is Mr. Ryoji. He founded Biosensors in 1990 through a group of precursor companies. And over the years, took bold, unusual steps to turn Biosensors into what is arguably the most successful medical device company in Singapore today, with sales of in excess of about 150 to 200 million a year. 200 million a year. Between Tom and Yoji, what we hope to distill, would be the ingredients of success, and obviously, what's the landscape like? There obviously things are happening in the world. The landscape has changed, and we hope through this discussion to find out what these changes are. So what I will do now is I'm going to hand over the mic to Anurag, who's going to start with the first question. Anurag, please.
Thanks, Jerry. The first question is for Dr. Tom Fogarty. Dr. Fogarty, you had 40 years of a stellar medical device career. During this time, you have seen the U.S. medtech industry emerge as an unparalleled leader in medtech innovation, without doubt, the largest market for medical technology. And your career in a way has it reflects that rise. But as you consider what is going on today in the U.S. marketplace, and you consider the future, where do you see this going? You believe that the U.S. will continue to be the innovation, medtech innovation leader. How do you see U.S. emerging vis-a-vis Asia and the rest of the world?
I don't know if most of you are aware of this, but you should be aware. We have the greatest opportunity any country has seen. Be very prominent in the medtech industry, not just your own population, but the world population. Yes, why that is? One of the reasons is that the United States is very busy exporting the medical investment complex. And you ought to be the person to take advantage of it. You can say, well, that's ridiculous. You know, what the politicians do are ridiculous things. And that's really what's going on in the United States. They have essentially legislated our industry out of business. It's true. They've taxed us. And so what we are doing in the United States, particularly it started with manufacturing. We had too much expensive force to not get them to manufacturing for effective cost. So we went offshore. This started probably about 1965 or in that range. That's accelerated to the point where right now, many of the major companies in the United States are manufacturing offshore. The percent varies, but it's of the devices, they have it's anywhere from 40 to 60%. So it's easy, I believe, for you people to take advantage of that, not only at the manufacturing level, but from the innovation level on up. And it's not going to be hard for you. You have somebody helping you. That's called the U.S. government. We have to go somewhere. And we're going to go somewhere, and we are going somewhere. So that appropriate perspective is something we wanted to hear. More than appropriate.
Well, do you think it will continue to be a leader? I mean, you know, it's been held this leadership position for a long time. And no matter what, you know, our strengths are maybe in Singapore in particular, or Asia generally. There's no question the center of gravity for innovation is still the US, especially in Silicon Valley.
You know, it may be now, but it's so why not count on action? I really would. I think they used to be, but for the innovation to continue, it has to have a start. The problem in the United States is that we can't get a start. We can't do clinical trials effectively. So we go offshore to do clinical trials. We can't do innovation effectively. This is an interesting story, but you should be aware of it. The United States, they tax companies. That's nice, and they should be taxed. How much we'll argue about it. A startup company, beginning next year, a startup company will be taxed 20% on the gross. I'm not a good mathematician, but I can tell you that ain't gonna work. A startup company doesn't make money. They make money, but they don't make a profit. When you start to make a profit in variable, it's anywhere between 3 and 5 years, that I would say, and that's been my experience. So you can't pay tax when you don't have the money. Pretty simple.
So what does it mean for innovation in the U.S.? Do you feel that companies are actually going to leave the U.S. and go to other parts of the world, Asia, Europe?
Well, they're already doing that. That's and it's I know of maybe 4, 2 are in Switzerland, one's in Germany, and the third was actually seeking a home. But, you know, I don't think it's going to stop quick enough to maintain any value to anybody other than offshore people taking advantage of it. And, you know, I've been seeing this going back to 1960 up to current time. And I've worked and dealt with the FDA for an entire period of time. And the FDA came from the standpoint at the beginning to be very reasonable, and now they're impossible. So I don't even look anymore to deal with the FDA in anything other than a 510K. It's a significant risk of ice class 3. The only reason I would talk to them, he was on the economic. We do a clinical study offshore. We would like to know what kind of information they would see in a clinical study. I made that inquiry. Now it's 6 months ago. I've yet to receive an answer, and they won't answer the phone. I just asked a question. I know they're not stupid. I think they can talk. So that's the kind of situation we're dealing with in the United States. Another company that one I was involved with went to the FDA and asked what they wanted in a pre-clinical study. I mean, before you're going to do a clinical study. And they told us what they wanted. It was a class 3 device. It cost us about $15 million, 15, startup company. Funded mostly. No, we didn't even have a venture person. So all that was funded by ourselves. We did the study exactly as they asked. They said they wanted the animal model to be a pig. So we did that. We went back and presented them the data. And they said, oh, now we'd like to see some more of these studies in the dogs. Well, you can't deal with it. It's impossible. So we're very discouraged, but we're optimistic about developing relationships with colleagues offshore.
Thank you. Yoshi. You know, the more I know about you, the more I read about you, the more you're an inspiration to me in respect of what you've done in biosciences. And I think the biosciences story needs to be heard much, much more than it has been. I think Singaporeans need to hear about biosciences. Can you tell us about some of the highlights and some of the most challenging moments that you faced in the history of biosciences?
First of all, I have to express my greatest honor to be able to sit next to Dr. Fogarty. Without his balloon castings, we would not have been biosensors today. So, I mean, this is how much we consider Tom's invention. And he's certainly the father of balloon castings. So, it's a great honor. I was thinking in the beginning, when I first was invited to this seminar, I thought I was going to have a fight with Thomas. He's going to say lots of good things about U.S., and I'm going to say lots of things about the East. And I guess, I may have to disappoint some of the audience here, because we have many things in common, just based on what Tom just mentioned earlier. I think, biosensors, I founded 20 years ago. We always thought we have to leverage on what our strengths lies instead of trying to be the same like everybody else. What I mean by that is we purposely avoided the U.S. market because U.S. was just too big for any small company to deal with, to play with. Unless you have a deep pocket, you have a real ability to extend yourselves, it's almost suicidal as far as I'm concerned. So I'm really glad that the Biosensors was able to focus on the market outside of the United States. So some of the high points, I have to say, when we received the CE mark, that is approval from the European authorities to allow us to commercialize our product. And it took us more than 6 years to do that. So that certainly was one of the real highlights. Thereafter, we managed to be able to show continuous growth quarter after quarter, and followed by real significant profit, especially in the last 2 years. I also recall when our technologies were validated, in front of about 15,000 audience in the year 2002 in Washington, D.C. during one of the biggest cardiology conferences, when we were introduced in the center main arena together with Professor Grube, who did the live case using our product. And overnight, we became famous among all the cardiologists. And I still remember the night before, I was still wondering what's going to be the result and how I was going to deal with it if the results were bad. And the next morning when I woke up, as I was walking the hall carrying our Biosensors tag, everybody just said, "Hey, good job, good job." It was almost like overnight. It changed from almost like a pet nightmare to a dream, in heaven. So those, I recall, were some of the high points. Did you ask me the low points too?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Always useful for the fellows when they start companies.
It's
not always a smooth ride, so they must learn.
Low points, I have to say, the first thing comes to my mind is money. We were not really backed up by so-called ventures, because as you could imagine, so many years ago, when I tried to tell them my focus is currently in Asia and no US, they will walk away. So I had to fund most of the money myself, together with some trusted friends. And I had many real good friends in Singapore. I call them angels. And they really helped me a great deal in those early days. I recall there were times I wasn't able to meet the payroll. And for 6 months I had to foot the payroll myself. I also recall some of the employees came to my office and say, "Unless you can show me you have money, I'm not going to work for you anymore." I mean, those were really, really tough to deal with. But I guess, unless you have the low points and you see the lowest points, you really don't know what it is. And by the time when you see the lowest points, in my own experience, you can really figure, can that get any worse? And then from there onwards, usually it goes up. So I think in life, we not only have to deal with high points, but low points as well, in my opinion.
So a follow-up question to that. There was a piece of really good news for you last week when Cordis changed and announced that they were pulling out of the market. Cypher is not going to be sold anymore. So now you're number 4 in the world market. That must make you happy. Question for you is, how does that affect the future of the global market? Is Cordis pulling out of the market an harbinger of things to come? Do you think other US companies are going to pull out of this market? Is Biosensors going to be number 1 in the world? And how are you going to compete with other emerging market players like Microport and Vesper?
Well, I don't know how I can answer about the J&J. I think J&J tends to have a very strong philosophy. Unless they're number 1, they don't want to be in it. So they gave up sales of more than $650 million US today, and they were willing to walk away, and they're willing to declare to the world that they are willing to even write off $500 million dollars just to in order to resolve this issue. To biosensors, I think what we can say is by default we have become essentially world fourth largest drug reset company today, but that never by design. And I think we think we have one less competitor to deal with. We also think, knowing Johnson & Johnson, large companies like Johnson & Johnson, they are not going to just go away that easily. So we will continue to watch, what's happening, and continue to be humble about it. I was asked by one of the persons recently why I think we succeeded, whereas big companies like Johnson & Johnson failed. I couldn't answer why Johnson & Johnson failed. I don't think they had to fail, but just decided to walk out. But all I could say was the reason that biosensors has been able to achieve this so-called status is because we had technology, and that was perceived today by many cardiologists, maybe one of the best. And we had to work very hard to prove to the world. It took us 10 years to prove that this technology works. And until such time, we were laughed the laughing stock. So you almost have to believe. If you have something that you really strongly believe in, I would recommend you don't just easily give up. So that's one of the reasons that we were able to do it.
Can I just come back to that very important decision to walk away from the US market? Did you try, and then as you were trying, you made an adjustment and eventually decided that it wasn't worth it, or did you you didn't even start because you could tell it wasn't worth the while?
Well, as you may know, Biosense is a listed company today. When we went listing, we were highly recommended by our bankers that we must pursue US as a market. So, like Tom mentioned, we also tried our own way, and for 3 years, and we spent almost $50 million in 3 years, and found out no avail. I mean, just could not touch even the tip of the iceberg, and it was something that we did try, and we also realized it's not for us.
And it was difficult because the FDA mandated certain requirements that you had to meet, or was it because you're a Singapore company and nobody wanted to do a trial in Singapore first?
Oh, no. I think it was difficult because FDA has already been reviewing all the big companies' applications, so they had to be fair. So being not the first one to come, and we need to follow whatever they have already established as a protocol, and also made it more difficult because the drug that we use called Biodesign is indeed the drug we design ourselves, and it's a brand new drug, so it made it even more difficult. So it's just the nature, the way that FDA works today. There's really not much you can really do as far as I'm concerned.
So this question is for Tom. Just a segue from what Yoshi has said. The decision to walk away from the US market or not go to the US market initially was a good decision for biosensor as difficult as it was. Do you think, generally speaking, though, US is the biggest market, from your point of view, do you think global companies should not go to the US market at all or for a while? What's your view on the market situation in the US?
I can't answer for big companies as to what to do. I will tell you this, we never know what to do. I know what small companies have to do, and that they have to stay out of the United States for Class 3 license. And for devices that require large clinical studies. You can't afford it. So you don't go. 510K devices, you can do much better. One thing you can do in the United States officially is what is called first in man. You've done all the preclinical work and you're qualified to the point where you are sure it's safe. based on the data that you get and based on your prior experience. We have to go offshore. And that represents an opportunity for countries that are willing to collaborate with us so that we get the preclinical work done, or the clinical work done. And that is first in man. Clinical trials is another issue that we separate the two. First in man versus clinical trial. If you demonstrate that first in man is safe, with a benefit, and the country has a chance to observe that, they will be more anxious to get engaged in the clinical trial. So I would say that for this country, the regulatory process is just beginning. We made new devices. You got to make sure that they really collaborate with the physicians, collaborate with industry, collaborate with the universities, listen to patients, and really collaborate with other agencies within the government. If they do that, you'll be way ahead of the game. So, and I say that because that's things that I have seen fail in the United States. It's reached the point for a device that you're seeking reimbursement for. You spend maybe $10 million on the first in man, $20 million. Get that evidence, you get a clinical trial done somewhere. You go back simultaneously, you work with the FDA, you submit the data to the FDA, say, okay, that's good. They'll put it under review. You go to the CMS as soon as you can, because they will want different data than the FDA. So you end up doing 2 clinical trials. Well, it's impossible. You can't do that. I mean, one regulatory body says they want this in the clinical study. You go to the other one, so you want to get reimbursement? They say, oh, no, we need this in the clinical study. There's no coordination between the agencies in the United States. You can't work with it.
Tom, if the U.S. became a dictatorship tomorrow, and you were its dictator, what would be the 3 things you would do straight away to correct the situation?
Repeat that question.
You're the dictator of the United States of America.
Yeah.
You have a chance to fix the healthcare system, in particular, the whole path that companies take to get innovative devices. What would you do?
I tell you my experience, and this is kind of interesting, when things are really dysfunctional, you look within inside and find out what and why it's dysfunctional. What I end up doing usually is getting rid of a lot of people. You become very small. You become very clever, much more cooperative. So with the FDA, I would go in there, try to figure out which ones we should retain, and fire the rest. I think I probably end up firing about 70%. Did that answer your question?
Fire away.
So actually segueing from that, your company is 1,000 people today. For a company that has the kind of revenues that you do, that's actually a pretty nimble, very lean company. Do you see that as a prototype for companies in Asia? And specifically, when you think about your products coming out in the marketplace in these emerging markets, the price points are important, and because the larger market cannot really support high prices. How does lean operation, lean innovation play into the pricing of the product, and how does it play into the market in these emerging markets?
I concur with Tom. Small is beautiful. I think no matter how big you become, you need to really try to check yourselves, whether that's really necessary needed. Oftentimes, we tend to just pile up all the compliances and this and that, and creating this huge organization that you no longer really know what is really going on anymore. We try to stay as lean as possible because we believe cost will always, price will always be a pressure, no matter what you do. At some point in time, it's always going to come, including the drug use centers. So we have to always be mindful about the cost effectiveness. And from that standpoint, I think it will be universally true. You just have to stay lean, no matter where you are in Singapore, in China, or in America.
But is that a conscious strategy on your part to price it correctly for the emerging markets? And how does that relate to the market? Because that's one of the challenges of the emerging markets. Even though there's a clinical need, market is not well thought of. Pricing is one reason, there are other reasons like distribution and so on.
Yeah, I think it's a conscious effort. We always look for how to make it cheaper without compromising the quality. Because there's always the pressure, if not this year, it will be next.
Gucci, we've heard from Tom some of the challenges facing companies in the US. From your experience, if you were to sort of distill, or even based on your current experience, what are some of the shortcomings of our system? The shortcomings of our system, what we have, what's lacking, what's really annoying, what should be done.
Well, I think we have been very fortunate to be able to receive a lot of support from the Singapore government throughout the years. And I think it takes time, but I still think human resource availability in Singapore will always be a challenge for a company like Biosensors who have decided to relocate everything to this island, including research and development. And I think if I have my wish, I would really want to see more talented pool, to be attracted to Singapore, so at least we know we don't have to reach out to other places. As in Singapore, it's a small island. We never consider Singapore as a market for us to tackle or to succeed. But we must look at Singapore as a operational base to tackle on the Asian markets like China and India. And from that standpoint, I think Singapore provides excellent infrastructure. Everything is provided here. And also, what's more is the multicultural characteristic of the peoples available here. And we are very happy.
Are there certain requirements when we talk about talent being really missing? Can you identify some groups that talent is more likely missed than others? Is it the engineers, is it the regulatory people?
I think overall, because this is something new, MedTech is really something new for Singapore. And that's why I'm very excited to hear the Biodesign is now brought from Stanford to Singapore. And it's just across the whole spectrum of requirements. It's not that people are stupid here. They just need experience. They just need hands-on. I also wish that they have enough patience. Don't just jump hop too much. Because, when you start jump hopping, you think you're learning something, also you're thinking that you may be collecting a little more extra money, but at the end, you're just going into the loop. My suggestion is just to hang in there if you really think, there's something to learn, and then master it before you jump hop, because of the little higher salaries. But I don't know how to stop that either.
Well, that reminds me of something you said earlier. In the darkest moments, people say, how did you keep that? What was it?
I said, you will have my guarantee that I will pay you. And I just didn't tell my wife about it. But somehow, when you have faith that things come to you. And I don't need to be spiritual, but I think face is very important. But I don't think in my case it was just, just purely face. I had no other choice, so I had to do it. That was something that made me very strong. I had no other alternative than pursue it.
Certainly, people wanted to follow you. So if you were to talk about your leadership style, if you had to distill, crystallize Lo Yu-Chi as a leader to one word, what would that be?
I think vision. They all share the same vision. It's just can you do it? You need money to do it. And the other one is I think people can appreciate you deliver your commitment. You have to be credible.
Yeah, I noticed that Tom actually was nodding as you're talking about some of the things that are needed to establish that leadership, right? So follow-up question to you, Dr. Purdy. When you think about Singapore and Asia as the hub for innovation in the medtech industry, the roots here, what are the 3 things that you think are really positive in this environment? And what are the 3 things that are really a problem? And please be blunt.
It's hard for me to be blunt. You have all the ingredients here. There's some that need refinement. You can't, people who don't have experience don't have experience. You should not act like they have experience. And that could be a problem. I think there's enough humility in your genes that you won't do that. That's a problem in the United States. It's really true. You have somebody that goes to Harvard and does very well, they go to Harvard Business School, and then they get a law degree or something, and they come out and they get the commercial world. You start telling everybody what to do because they've been to Harvard, they have a bunch of certificates and that stuff, and people should listen to them. As a matter of fact, they're the most dangerous people in the world. They do not know shit. It's really true. Now, some of you guys can get Harvard degrees and that kind of stuff. I don't know that. And there are exceptions to that. But in general, if you want business to fail, hire a Stanford MBA. You'll reach your goal. So what I'm trying to say, you need experience. Experience, you need wisdom. When you start out, you're not going to hit it, so you've got to get it somewhere. And you can do that, but you're going to have to attract somebody, and you're going to have to pay for it. But it's well worth paying for, and you'll move ahead. The other thing I keep hearing, where do we start? You start by starting. That's serious about that. It's not talking. Yeah, they do more talking than doing. So you got to just you have to have a sense of urgency in this field. If you don't, you'll be outpaced very, very quickly. So you really have to understand that you have to be efficient, you have to be effective, you have to watch the pennies. And you were talking about you don't have money to pay somebody. We have a company now, we have that situation. That's hard. We have that over a period of 6 months, 20 people go, we're down to 2. And we're down to 2. We're very critical. And we don't have any more money. So what we did is we went and said, look, we don't have any more money. We have some money, but we can't really pay the salary that you want yet. I'm very sorry, but we have our choices. We just let you go, and we'll figure out something, or we can pay you 25% of what you paid for the next 6 months. I said, if you need a job, I'll help you. You wouldn't need a job. I said, I can give you good recommendations, and I would suggest you start looking around right now. And we're here to help. We're sorry we have the customer side. They both went home, they thought about it, and they said, we'll take it, and we'll sell it. Now, the reason I tell that story, that's the kind of people you need in the start. You need people who will stick with you as long as they can. And you is being part of the company in terms of ownership. You really have to respect people for doing that, and you will understand the value they bring. So very often, value application, who gets what for how much, is really missed by many, many people. Value application is critically important. And I've seen where the CEO thinks he's so good he should get a big salary. Usually that's the case. But there are other people in that group that may be equally as well. So value application is a difficult thing. One, you're going to have to manage if you're going to get this big. And you have to do it respectfully. Some people are not going to get the value they think they should get. You just have to make a decision to move on. You can't spend weeks arguing over salaries.
So, last two questions before we open the questions, the floor. If you were to start your next company, as I'm sure you would you start at a place like Singapore? And what would you do that would be different from what you did in the last 33, 34 companies?
Well, there are probably so many things that would be different, there's not enough time to tell you. Because from every experience you learn a lot. And truly, I mean, even I'm 100 years old, but I still listen. And so there are things. When you say start a company, it's critically important. If you start a company in this area with a physician that knows what he's doing, an engineer that knows what he's doing, the two work together. And that's how you start a company. You have to have constant, immediate proximity to one another. You cannot do that long distance. Now, there are things that we can do. We're starting to do it. We've already done some. We want to do the preclinical trial, the first in-man trial. Some, and this would be an ideal location to do that, where you don't have a number of patients for a clinical trial, but you certainly have a number of patients for the first in-man. Now, somebody say, well, you're experimenting. We're not experimenting. We're investigating. We experiment on rats and attorneys. It's true. And you tell the patient they're not an experiment. We're investigating a problem, and we think we have an answer to the problem with new technology. Now, if they refuse, they should if they want to. And we don't do anything to tell them that. We tell them the benefits of each of the procedures and move on. Risk is not determined by an agency. Risk is determined by a patient and a physician. Now, the reason I say that, if an agency thinks they can determine risk, they can't. We as physicians sometimes have a hard time determining the degree of risk. So I don't know how a bureaucrat can give the answer to that. Well, the fact is they can't. So that would be one way to start an association with Singapore. Certainly we want things manufactured offshore for a whole bunch of different reasons. And we do that now. But we don't really know who to go to. We're not just communities. You could be a source of information that would say, this is who we've dealt with. It could be here, it could be China, or somewhere else. But at least you'll be part of the process of what we have to deal with from the start to the beginning. I think after we've done the very early stage work, it would be easier to move some of what we do offshore. The process of doing that, you got to make sure in that transition nothing falls between the cracks. So that means that somebody, where we're going to move it to, has to come to the United States to see and observe what we're doing and get familiar with the issues and problems that we've had in the past. So in transition, there's nothing lost. And even when you get proximity within the United States, devices that are sold to large companies, they can let a lot of things fall between the cracks. And they will. If I feel there's certain personnel that they should buy from the company, I tell them, you know, this is what you should do. And if they don't do it, when I'll negotiate, I say, well, I don't trust you. You're not concerned about optimal patient care. You don't know what is needed. And you should take this person. And he's been with it for 5 years, 3 years, taking long enough so that you don't put anything up through the cracks. And it could be him or her, it could be multiple, or it could be two. But I think over the years, when you relate to large acquirers in that fashion, they actually respect you. Because they understand that you're focused on excellence, you don't want any mistakes, and you're very concerned about optimal patient care. I don't know, how they get started on that rant?
We just started in Singapore. And
No, the answer at some point in time, we would move the company in Singapore.
Excellent.
But under certain conditions.
It's the same question for you, Yoshi. Would you start a company in Singapore again? And what would you do differently today?
I would start Singapore again. I think if anything that I would do differently would be to be a little wiser. Make sure that I would beg for the money instead of
customer immersion, insights, needs identification. We're talking about a new country and Asia trying to go ahead with medtech innovation. So can both of you share what are the things that you've learned, and after many years of learning, that you know that you will never compromise when it comes to need identification, customers' insights, to many of the budding entrepreneurs sitting here? That's one question. And yet, may I pose a second one? Second question is, looking at East and in Asia here, are there any areas or technology platform that you feel Asia can build on it to gain a stronger advantage or to establish?
I think every company is different, but certainly you have to have a real sensitive antenna. Try to make sure you know what the customer's needs are, and then everyone is different. Because if you're a large company like Johnson & Johnson, your needs will be different from a small company like Biosensors. We just have to make sure there's a certain niche that you can call out. So I cannot just generalize it. But you just have to, this is where your strategy has to come in, and then your vision has to come in. I think as far as Asia is concerned, the asset here is the sheer size of the population and then the growth of the economy. And I think that can never be underestimated. I see our drug using STEM market alone within a few years. China alone will surpass the United States.
Well, you go ahead, try that.
Yeah, actually, what I like to really learn is because, especially with Dr. Fogarty over here, assuming strategy is clear of where any company wants to go, but how do you go in and really find out the customer insights and to really be clear, working together to fine-tune and identify the needs to through observation, through understanding the jobs? What is it things that you have learned that you can share as advice to a group of engineers and budding scientists sitting here to be able to gain entry into innovation?
Yeah, well, remember, the needs in different countries often are the same, but often are different. And how you determine that, you ask your colleagues that are offshore and say, do you have this problem? And today I just learned by asking the question that the incidence of the technology that we currently put in the marketplace is thrombophlebitis. It's clots in the legs. Well, apparently that's not very common over here. In the United States, it's extremely common. On the East Coast, it's less common. On the West Coast, it's less common. Central America, it is common. So you not only have to look at what's going on in another country, you've got to look at what's going on within your own country. So that tells you about needs. I want to mention one thing that I've heard twice this week. The patient, you have two patients. The first is the patient, and the second is the doctor. I think you have to bear that in mind. You don't sometimes recognize needs by talking to a physician. Talk to a patient, and they'll tell you a lot, and the doctor won't tell you. It used to be patients would say, oh, it's so painful, doctor, I hope you can avoid that. And you say, well, I'm trying to make the incision smaller, but it's still going to hurt. Some doctors would say, can't do anything about it. Well, guess what? Laparoscopic surgery significantly reduces the amount of pain. So you can't dismiss what a patient wants. They've always wanted minimally invasive surgery. We as physicians said it's impossible in general. During my training as a surgeon, it was interesting that they would say the bigger the incision was, the bigger the doctor. So I would always say, is that right? Well, I don't think so. And it's proven to be that it is right. So it's less on listening to the patient.
I'm Joaquin from ASTA. My question is, how do you protect your inventions right now, especially when you start to go outside the US, into China and India?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, you have a lot of money. Sometimes you don't have it. And you do have a lot of right terms to tell me what. The patent law is changing so fast that you don't know what's going on. That's true in the United States, and it's true in other countries. So it's a moving target. You can file in many different companies and be protected. But prosecution of a patent in that country, if it's required, may be not the thing to do. But it's so expensive. So sometimes you get license fees that you require on an annualized basis. You have so many things you're protecting, you're spending 50 to 100 grand a year on just protecting what you've already protected through a patent. So it's difficult and expensive.
But we take two last questions, and then we'll adjourn.
Okay, my name is Lai White, recent transplant back from the Bay Area, work at NGU. I wanted to follow up, I'm actually at the tech transfer office, and I wanted to follow up on the IP question. I heard you talk some time ago about your perspective on the Stanford Tech Transfer Office, and I wanted you to perhaps, I don't know if your views have changed, but I'd be interested in hearing your position on how balance the interests of the organizations to whom the IP belongs and the desire to commercialize them, and how do you, is there an optimal solution to this sometimes contentious issue?
Well, it's interesting enough. There's a great variability with the licensing. Stanford. And the reason why the interviewers were from Stanford, engineering, and they recognize the value that they receive from some of the intellectual property is very, very significant. And they want to repeat that. So they're very easy to work with. Some are impossible to work with, and you just kind of forget about it. As the personnel in those institutions changes, what they do is going to change. So, I used to call OTLs, out to lunch. But in fact, they're not all out to lunch. Some are very good, very competitive, and they want something for it, and they should get something for it. So I haven't seen that pattern. I don't know if that was a question he asked or not.
My name is Bisai, and I'm in Singapore Management University, and I help people start their companies. I have a friend, Balamani, who lives in Palo Alto, spends 6 weeks in Palo Alto and 6 weeks in Bangalore, starting a company in India. I thought I'd share his observation, and then I have a question for you, Chief. He said when he works with engineers and others in his American company, when he gives them a problem and they think there is no solution, they will come back and say, I don't think there is a solution. Whereas, when he gave similar problems to his Indian engineers, when there was no solution, they will continue to think that they were making a mistake and not identifying the solution. They will continue to work forever, trying to find that solution that never existed. So, Yuji, in your experience, did you come across some unique and situations working in Asia that might have a bearing with the culture in Asia?
Well, yeah, it's quite often, the truth of the matter is, our most drug and polymer technologies started in the U.S. And it's from real, polymer scientists and pharmacists. I think it's just a cultural difference. And also the culture is supported by experience. And here, I think people tend to want to follow the orders, follow the directions, more than thinking out of the box. Whereas in the U.S., I often find real innovative people. They are able to think out of the box, and I think that will take a while before Asian engineers or scientists will be able to get to that level. I think it's just time it takes and experience involved. So yeah, I often see that difference myself too.
Well, thank you very much. There are no questions. No further questions. I'd like to just once again thank Tom and Yoshi, first and foremost, as well as Anurag, who is also flown here from the US to help us participate. Let's put our hands together for all three of them. Thank you, and we have snacks and drinks on the veranda overlooking the river, and it's just all over there. Let's make ourselves home. Thank you so much.